Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, August 28th. Tropical storm Dorian has intensified over the past 12 to 18 hours or so, now with maximum sustained winds back up to 60 miles per hour. The situation overall has become more ominous because of a couple of factors. First of all, Tropical storm Dorian has very well effectively battled dry air over the Caribbean. It has not had much of an impact on the circulation pattern surrounding Tropical storm Dorian. We've talked about that dry air mass over the Caribbean that moved from the African continent all the way across the tropical Atlantic into the Caribbean with the hope that it could weaken this tropical system, but it has effectively battled that dry air. And another factor that makes it a more ominous situation this morning for the southeastern part of the U.S. and the Bahamas is the fact that it looks like this system will not go over the island of Hispaniola. Rugged terrain on that island with mountain peaks higher than 10,000 feet usually result in a weakening of a tropical system. The fact that it looks like it'll slide to the east of Hispaniola is a more favorable factor for a stronger system once it enters into the southwestern part of the Atlantic Ocean. Looks like Dorian will impact Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands later today and tonight, and then slip into the southwestern part of the Atlantic where sea surface temperatures are very warm for this time of the year. Here's the very latest visible satellite image, and here is Tropical storm Dorian right now, again with maximum sustained winds at 60 miles per hour. The Virgin Islands right here, Puerto Rico right here, and it looks like it will avoid Hispaniola over in this part here. It'll slide to the east, ultimately going into the southwestern part of the Atlantic, and from there it may make a turn right towards the Florida East Coast. Still a little too early to say for sure. There are historical reasons we'll talk about in a moment or two that suggest it may not make it all the way. It may actually turn up the coast at some point. So all residents from North Carolina down to southern Florida should monitor this situation closely. Very likely will become a hurricane, if not over the next day or two, certainly later this week or early this weekend in this part of the Atlantic where sea surface temperatures are very warm for this time of the year. Well, let's take a look at the official positioning by the National Hurricane Center right now. First of all, this system that we've talked about over the past couple of days actually has now become Tropical storm Aaron. It will not directly impact the east coast of the U.S. It'll basically get intertwined with a frontal system, move up to the north and east over the next few days, ultimately could spread some rain over Nova Scotia. Here is Tropical storm Dorian right now closing in on Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and once it gets out over the southwestern Atlantic, it will move over very warm waters in the southwestern Atlantic. It certainly can reach hurricane status, maybe category 1 or 2 on the table here later this week or early this weekend, and ultimately it could impact Florida, or there's a chance that it turns up to the Carolinas or Georgia. Too early to say for certain. One of the reasons why I think it's a possibility that it doesn't make it all the way into Florida, though that is certainly on the table, is historical tracks based on a position right here. And let's take a look at that right now. And here we go. This is kind of an ugly looking map, but it gives us some important information here from a historical point of view, a climatological point of view. When a tropical system is in this part of the Caribbean Sea near Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands, these are the tracks that ultimately have resulted in. Certainly Florida is on the table, but usually a system in this particular location doesn't make it all the way west to Florida. It turns up the east coast or even into the western part of the Atlantic out to sea. That, of course, would be the best scenario here, but history is on the side that this storm doesn't make it all the way to Florida. So certainly right now some computer forecast models are strongly insinuating a landfall in central Florida later in the weekend or early next week. So all residents, the bottom line here is all residents from the Carolinas down to Florida should continue to monitor this system very closely over the next few days. Well, again, one of the things we were hoping would weaken Tropical Storm Dorian was dry air over the Caribbean Sea. This dry air moved westward from the African continent across the tropical Atlantic into the Caribbean Sea. But here is the moisture. This is a map we've shown in the past couple of days. Total precipitable water, really a reflection of water vapor in the atmosphere. And here is the high moisture content associated with Tropical Storm Dorian. These greens and blues out ahead of it over the Caribbean Sea have really not caused any weakening at all. In fact, as we mentioned at the onset here, Tropical Storm Dorian intensified slightly over the past 12 to 18 hours, though. It is effectively battling this dry air, and it looks like that will not be a factor for weakening over the next several hours. Also, the fact that it will largely avoid the rugged terrain of Hispaniola is a bullish sign for the intensification prospects for Tropical Storm Dorian, and sea surface temperatures are very warm in the southwestern Atlantic. Here's the moisture swirl associated with what is now Tropical Storm Erin, and should move to the north and east over the next few days. Well, here's a compilation of predicted storm tracks for Tropical Storm Dorian from numerous computer forecast models, again located right now in this particular region right in here. Looks like it'll impact Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands later today and tonight, and then slip into the northwestern part of the Atlantic Ocean and take a general course towards Florida. But whether it makes it all the way to Florida or then turns up into the southeastern U.S., places like Georgia, South Carolina, or even North Carolina on the table, that remains to be seen. Certainly all residents from North Carolina down to southern Florida have to stay on guard and monitor this situation over the next few days. Waters are quite warm in this part of the Atlantic. Very likely, if not a hurricane over the next day or two, 3-4 days out, very likely to become a hurricane, perhaps up to Category 2 status. Right now, even a major hurricane, Category 3, is certainly not completely ruled out at this particular time. So again, this is a compilation of storm tracks from numerous models. I will say this, in this particular position where it's located right now, in this area right here, there have been about 17 of these examples since 1950, and all but one of them avoided Florida. Only one of them, I believe it was Hurricane Jean in 2004, made it all the way to Florida. Most of the others turned up the coastline or went out to sea. So history is on the side of Florida here, but certainly have to stay on guard anywhere from North Carolina down to southern Florida over the next couple of days. Well, one final set of charts. I just want to show the ensemble run of the European model last night in terms of the 500 millibar height anomaly forecast map. So this goes forward in 24-hour increments. This is the forecast map for this evening, Wednesday evening, and one of the main players I want to point out will be a developing ridge in the western Atlantic. That will have a big impact on the ultimate path of this tropical system. So let's move forward here and show this ridge that will form. Here we get to Friday night, and all this orange right here represents a height anomaly showing higher heights than normal, or an upper level ridge of high pressure forming over the western part of the Atlantic. And here's a reflection of Tropical Storm Dorian in this particular computer forecast model. Again, it's a ensemble run of the European model here. This is Friday evening. High pressure situated in this region will have a basically clockwise flow of air that will help to steer this thing towards the west, towards the U.S. coastline here. Let's go out another 24 hours. This ridge intensifies, and strong ridge in this particular region will certainly help to push this thing to the west and maybe into the state of Florida. Just too early to say at this particular time, but this is one thing we'll be focused in on over the next few days. And here we get by Sunday night, and here's a reflection of that storm closing in on Florida with high pressure ridging over the western Atlantic to the north of the tropical system. So all residents from North Carolina down to southern Florida have to monitor this situation very closely. It's become a little bit more ominous this morning because of the fact that the dry air has not had much of an impact on the circulation pattern within Tropical Storm Dorian, and it looks like the track itself will avoid Hispaniola, which also was a possibility of weakening with this particular system. So stay tuned for further updates later today and certainly over the next few days here at PerspectaWeather.com. That's it for now. I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.